courage,
fortitudo,
wisdom,
prudentia,
temperance,
temperantia,
justice.
justitia.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Stoic. I'm so glad you're here. I feel your pain.
I'm Steve, and this is the Sunday Stoic, and today's episode is on impressions. Not the terrible impressions I just attempted to do, but our impressions of events occurring around us. This show is about the philosophy of Stoicism, a practical philosophy that can be applied to your daily life to improve your life, to help instill inner calm, to keep you from overreacting to events around you, and to give your life a little bit more meaning and purpose. It's one of those philosophies that you can do as a religious person, as a secular person. It doesn't matter. It's one of those things that you can apply to your life no matter what. And it's handed down from, obviously, the Greeks and the Romans, and then it kind of went semi-dormant for a while and has recently had a resurgence. So our job is to take this really cool philosophy, a philosophy that has a lot of parallels with other world philosophies, and update it and bring it to the modern world. Just think about it. If a modern Christian, let's just say, went back to the year 100 AD, or 100 CE, if you will, and talked to Christians of that era, they would have very little in common with each other. In fact, they may be burned at the stake for heresy or something, who knows. Just like a Stoic from back in the day, if their school had been allowed to continue all the way to the present moment, I'm sure modern Stoicism would have a core of the original Stoicism in it, but there would be lots of additions, lots of evolution to the philosophy. So it's our job to apply modern reasoning to the kernels of truth discovered by the ancient Stoics and others, and bring it into the forefront and give ourselves a new philosophy, something to help to guide us through our daily lives. So, like I said, today's episode is on impressions, and what we're talking about once again is, let's say you get a text from somebody, and it's just like, let's say you say, "Hey, did you like my presentation? Was my presentation good today?" And they reply, "Yeah, ... Okay, you get that text. And you can look at that text, and you can think, you can look at just what it is, just the facts. Yeah, ... Okay, there's no value there. It's not a good text, it's not a bad text. But then your impression is what you make of that. Yeah, ... Oh, yeah. Does that mean, yeah, that was great. What piece of garbage. Or does that mean, yeah, ... Awesome job, but they just shorthanded it and fired the text off. So, being a modern view of this idea, using text messaging here, but this applies all the time to things we see in the news, etc., etc. We get these impressions. We see events, and then we have an impression about that event. It's our choice whether to accept that impression or to deny it power over us. Say, no, I'm not going to make a judgment on this right now. Or you might say, this thing that happened is not in my power, and therefore I'm not even going to worry about the impression I have on it. Like, oh, the president said this thing yesterday. Well, I can't control that. I'm not even going to worry about it. So these are the kinds of things we're thinking about. So, before we get into it, if you would like to do a reading for the show or ask for a topic to be covered, shoot me an email at sundaystoic@gmail.com, and we'll do that. You can send me an MP3. Basically, what will happen is you shoot me an email, and we'll figure out what topic you want to read for, and I might suggest some readings, or if you have some readings that you really like or a topic you want to suggest, we can put it together that way. Anyway, today we're going to hear from, as usual, the late Stoics, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus, and we're going to talk about impressions. The Enchiridion by Epictetus, Chapter 1, Paragraph 4. Seek at once, therefore, to be able to say to every unpleasing impression, "You are but an impression, and by no means the real thing," and examine it by these rules which you have, and first and chiefly by this, whether it concerns things which are within your power, or those which are not. And if it concerns anything beyond our power, be prepared to say that it is nothing to you. The Thoughts of Marcus Aurelius, Chapter 6, Verse 13. When we have meat before us, and such edibles, we receive the impression that this is the body of a fish, and this the dead body of a bird or of a pig, and again that this wine is only a little grape juice, and this purple robe some sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. Such then are these impressions, and they reach the things themselves and penetrate them, and so we see what kind of things they are. Just in the same way we ought to act all through life, and where there are things which appear most worthy of our approbation, we ought to lay them bare, and look at their worthlessness, and strip them of all the words by which they are exalted. For outward show is a wonderful perverter of the reason. Moral Letters to Lucilius by Seneca. Letter 13, On Groundless Fears, verses 4 and 5. There are more things, Lucilius, likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. I am not speaking to you in the Stoic strain, but in a milder style. For it is our Stoic fashion to speak of all those things which provoke cries and groans as unimportant and beneath notice. But you and I must drop such great-sounding words, although heaven knows they are true enough. What I advise you to do is this, not to be unhappy before the crisis comes, since it may be that the dangers before which you paled as if they were threatening you will never come upon you. They certainly have not yet come. Accordingly, some things torment us more than they ought, some torment us before they ought, and some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all. We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow. So the Stoics tell us that there are things in our power and things outside of our power. A very simple idea, but a very powerful one. We shouldn't get too worried about the things we can't control. So we receive all of this input from the world around us, the things people say to us, the things that we see on the news, the things that happen to us. These things, in and of themselves, are neither good nor evil. But our brain creates an impression of those things, and that's where we start to judge them and feel hurt by them, or anxious, or angry, or happy. Someone screams at you and flips you off out of their car window on your way to work. Maybe you did something to make them mad. Maybe they're just having a bad day. These are the different impressions you could have. Oh, I've done something wrong, therefore I feel bad. Or, oh, that poor person's having a bad day. I'm not really the word they called me as they drove by screaming. These are the impressions you can get. So the idea is you get an impression. You can't help it. When someone tells you you're a SOB or whatever, your brain creates an impression. I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm sad. But it's your job whether or not to give assent to that impression, where you stop it dead in its tracks and say, nope, I'm not going to give this thing power over me. I don't care what you just said. Unless you think the thing they said is true and you need to work on your attitude or your performance, then don't give it power over you. Don't do it. So in the first reading, we hear from Epictetus, who's a big proponent. If you read any of his works, you'll see impressions brought up over and over again. So we heard from the Enchiridion, and we may have done this reading actually once before, but I thought it was appropriate again, where he talks about the use of impressions. you don't really have much control over the world, but you do have control over your impressions of the world, how you interact with your impressions with the world. So let me restate, you don't necessarily have control over what your impressions are, but whether or not they're reasonable and you allow them to affect you. So impressions are almost like on an emotional level. I heard a noise. I'm in bed. I hear a noise. Oh my gosh, it's probably a burglar. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Or, oh, I heard a noise. Well, it's probably not a burglar. Maybe I should investigate further before I judge what that noise was. So you have different ways of interpreting things that happen to you. And then we hear from Marcus Aurelius in an interesting discussion about impressions. And he's suggesting we apply this system of impressions to our entire life, but he gives examples of this thing the Stoics did where they break things down to their component parts. So if you're really attached to something, I believe we've talked about this in a previous episode as well, but you're really attached to something, like back then, having a purple robe really was something, because purple was a very expensive dye. And the dye was made from shellfish, from some sort of sea creature that you'd mash up and get purple dye out of. And he said, well, you can look at a purple robe and say, wow, this makes me somebody. This is important. This is something I really want. Or you can say, that's a bit of wool with some blood from shellfish on it. There's two different impressions here that you could work with. Which one do you give assent to? Oh, this is really important. Or, well, it's really just some sheep's wool dyed in blood. That's not really that exciting, is it? And he talks about this with things we eat. Ooh, this is a very fancy dinner. Or you could say, that's a piece of dead pig on my plate with a bit of dead broccoli. Okay, well, something that you might want, you might in the long run enjoy, but don't hype it up too much. Don't allow the impression to run away with you. He says we should take that same attitude that we can more easily apply to these objects that we wear or we eat, and apply it to our lives in general. Once again, we're keeping in mind the things we can control, the things we can't control, and trying to not disturb our inner calm by letting our impressions of the world dislodge our contentment. And then finally, we hear from Seneca, whose Moral Letters to Lucilius I've been reading this year. And what he does here is he's talking to his friend Lucilius, reminding him that it's not a great idea to get all anxious about things beyond our power to control. As he says, there are things that are likely that are out there. They're more likely to frighten us than they are to crush us. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. So thinking about that meeting with your boss that's coming up, you thinking about it and churning over it and worrying about it is far worse than the actual meeting. Worry is worse than the thing itself. And he points out that in reality, you should really try to live now. Live in the now. Do not be, as he says, do not be unhappy before the crisis comes. So this goes back to the idea of Stoic mindfulness. Live in the present. Don't let the future, something that you don't even know if it's going to happen, affect your happiness. And he says the dangers that you're worried about may fade away. They may never even happen. And if it does happen, most of the things that affect us, we let them affect us more than we should. And some things we let make us sad that we shouldn't let affect us at all. So this goes back to this idea of impressions. Something happens to you. If you haven't practiced Stoicism and practiced thinking about these things, it's really easy to be hurt by a comment. But if you've thought about these things and you've began to internalize them, then things start to run off your back like water off a duck. Just today, for example,